On now.
All right, and we are going live in five, four, three, two, one. Hello, and I want to welcome everybody to Healthy Seminars. Today we have a webinar with Sharon Weizenbaum. We're going to talk about classical herb principles. And just so you know, YouTube does not allow us to say the word without having our YouTube being removed. We've had that already. So we call it our guest, the evil chi, or the virus that cannot be named. But Sharon, hopefully, she may slip, but hopefully she won't say it because we've used that term, virus that can't be named, but we said it the right way, and YouTube killed the video. And so that's just because somebody who's running the social media only wants a certain narrative going out. And so if you're not the CDC or something, they're kind of killing your YouTube. So just so you know, that's why we won't be using the term. Um, my name is Lauren Brown. I'm also a practitioner. I'm so glad you guys are here. I want to let you know that we've put together several resources for you on the healthyseminars.com/resources page. We have Conscious Tuesdays weekly right now. We have Throwback Thursdays. We have these webinars like we're having today. We have a bunch on telehealth. Not tomorrow, on Sunday, I'm doing a talk on how to survive and thrive during these times. We got Deborah Betts, Claudia Sigovitz, Kate Levitt coming in to do telehealth for pregnant women. So they're going to give you valuable tips that you can share online for your pregnant patients because babies aren't going to wait. And then we have the company Jane coming in to talk about telehealth technology. We got a telehealth 5-hour webinar on Saturday if you're wanting to transition. So we're doing everything we can to give you a whole bunch of free resources. We also have our regular online demand and live webinars for CUs on our site. Our site is 25% off during isolation, so at least till April 17th, most likely will go longer. So if you just go to the resources page on Healthy Seminars, you can see all the free offerings that we're doing to support you during this time. And there are some courses there that you need to invest in if you want as well, but tons of free stuff. And our goal is to help you find the calm while in the presence of this uncertainty, and also to give you tools. So if you choose to keep in touch with your patients and you're going to start to do online consults, which I think the term is telehealth they're using, or telemedicine, that you'll have tools from what we're going to share with you in these free resources that you can take these and then start to use this in your telehealth practice. So that's our goal. All the stuff that we're doing these days, it's two main objectives, because people say the recordings are for 48 hours. Why is that? Can we have it longer? We have two main intentions here at Healthy right now. One is to create community. Actually, if you look at our resource page, our logo says community, unity, immunity. And the reason that's the case is we want community. So although we have physical distancing, I know the government's calling it social isolation. We're choosing not to use that word because it's not social isolation. Right now, it's physical distancing, but we can have social solidarity, we can have social innovation. And so this is about connection. And so we want you here like you are during the live webinar. It's not what we want to give you something like this and then you go watch it in isolation 4 days or a week later. That doesn't create community. So I'm about creating community right now. And the other thing is to give you tools. And so this is here to give you tools, whether it's to help you find that calmness because you're experiencing anxiety because of what's going on in our environment. So we're providing a lot of tools to help you find that peace of mind. And we're providing you tools that you can use for yourself, for your loved ones, or if you're still practicing, to support people in your community. So those are our goals, and community is a big part, which is why in a moment we're going to unmute you guys shortly so you can just kind of connect. And when you do this, it's loud and chaotic. However, it's funny, if you listen, you'll start to hear voices of people you know, and the Zoom will grab images and you'll start to show up. And that's part of that community stuff. Before I do that, though, I just want to actually let's do that and then we'll introduce Sharon's talk. So, team, if you can unmute everybody and everybody just say hi to Sharon, hi to somebody, slide through the pictures.
Hi,
Sharon.
Sharon.
Hi,
Lee.
Neil.
Hi.
Everyone.
It's wonderful
Hello, everyone.
to
Good
be
morning.
here.
Hi,
Hi,
Sharon. Hi, everybody else. Everybody.
Amber.
Hi, hi,
Hi.
Sharon.
Morning.
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Hi,
Sue here.
Good. Hi, Sharon.
That's
Uh,
fine.
you're doing good.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you. All right. All right. So
That
let's
was
just
wild.
get ready. That was fun, eh? All right. We still got Sharon on here. I just want to see. Oh, there she is. Okay, good. I see you. I just want to share. This is where we're going to put the recording. So on Healthy Seminars, Sharon has a bio page. So you see her. So if you go to presenters on the website, under bio, we're going to just put it right here around her, between the where it says her courses are on sale, between her written bio and this coupon code. We're going to put the video here. So when the video is edited, because it takes us a little bit of time. So sometime our time on Friday, it will be there. We're going to keep it up there for 48 hours. And if you're going to do telehealth practicing and you don't have needles anymore to treat your patients, there's so many things we can offer: diet, lifestyle, qigong, stress reduction. There's lots of stuff, the cornerstone of medicine. And for those that practice herbal, all of Sharon's courses are herbal. And we were talking earlier, I said to Sharon, if somebody wanted to really go into the telehealth and just really start to hone in on the herbal courses, where do they start and what do you recommend? And so clarifying diagnosis gives you the principles, the basis. So I just want to share all these are on sale. And then I like her naughty disease course, but all these have this. And then she has a couple on classical formulas. So I just want to let you know that there's lots of places for you to uh, improve your herbal prescribing. Now, for this talk today, I want to also remind you that this is for educational purposes only. This is not going to be medical advice. This is not medical advice. And as usual, if you have a health issue, please seek out a healthcare provider. This is for educational and entertainment purposes. So I'm going to jump off here. I want to remind you guys that you can type in the chat. At the end, we'll do a discussion, we'll take questions. And if you're looking for all these resources I mentioned, free and not, around telehealth and around these webinars and Conscious Tuesday and Throwback Thursday, on the homepage, halfway down, there's that Community Unity Immunity logo. Click on that, and that takes you to the resource page where you can find everything. Or just email us and we'll help direct you as well. All right, Sharon, if you want to share your screen, and then once that's going, I'll turn off my we'll get you started. And Sharon's going to introduce this course. And remember, I'm calling this the virus that cannot be named. Sharon will have another name, but that's why we're not naming it, just so YouTube allows us to stay up. Sharon, please take it away.
Okay, thank you, Lauren, and welcome everybody. And I appreciate you coming. So this lecture is really going to be about some of the foundational principles that I'm using to understand this virus and to work with it. And I want to let you know that we've organized a small group of practitioners. We call it, I can't use the word, the Blank Club. And we're sharing cases and our experiences using the principles that I'm talking with you about. And so far it's been very encouraging. Every person has had positive results. And so we're also, as part of this club, we're going to follow up from this lecture with a series of more specific lectures about formulas. Because I'm going to sort of be giving some of the foundational principles that might lead you to different formulas. But if you feel like you don't understand how and when you might apply a specific herbal formula, we'll have a series of classes. I think next week there'll be 2 classes. We're not doing the Wednesday because of Passover, but the following week and for a number of weeks after, we'll do Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Each time going over a different formula so that you can, hone your skills for being able to identify the pattern in your patients that matches these formulas. So we won't be going into a lot of detail about formulas in this course, except sort of where they fit in terms of the physiology and foundational principles, but we will be following up with that. So, what are our foundational principles? And this is a really important question. We're seeing a lot of valuable reports coming out of China about, different hospitals and what they're giving in response to the virus. And, um, so there's a question like, so is this what we should use for our patients? And, um, there's various ways of approaching it that are being expressed from China. And should we assume that we should give these same formulas? But we also have to see that there are a lot of different circumstances coming from China. A lot of the cases that we're seeing are people that are in a pretty horrible acute situation, enough for them to be hospitalized, whereas where the strength of our medicine is really in the in-between time that I mentioned in a blog post, where when someone first gets sick and before it gets to that kind of critical point, we have a lot of power um, to help it change direction. So it may not be the things that we're hearing from China may not be the actual things we need for our patients. And we also have to question, how many of these reports are things that we can trust. And we all know, there are some things that come out that we can't trust and some that we can trust. And it's hard to know. So, it, you know, since we can't necessarily just do what they're doing in China, then what do we do? And I think the important thing is to really ground in the foundational principles of our medicine. These principles are like, how does the body work? How do our medicines work? Um, and how do we diagnose our patients? And this is what we studied and know. And so we want to be able to apply the principles we already have. That because what they're seeing from China may not match what we're actually seeing with our own patients. So, what are these foundational principles? What are our principles? And, there are so many different schools of thought in Chinese medicine. And so, what I'm going to be sharing is the foundational principles I work from. And it may be really different than the ones you've learned or the ones that you're comfortable with or the ones that you're working from. Um, but I hope to put across like why I have these as my foundational principles and how they relate to some of the other principles we might have learned. So the first thing I want to talk about is um, the kind of standard idea of what is the immune system. And these are some quotes. If you look up what's the immune system, you can get all kinds of information. But I think that these quotes sort of summarize the our culture's general sense of what the immune system is and what it does. So I want to read these. The immune system is a host defense system comprising many biological structures and processes within an organism that protects against disease. To function properly, an immune system must detect a wide variety of agents known as pathogens, from viruses to parasitic worms, and distinguish them from the organism's own healthy tissue. It looks out for you. Your immune system works to root out germs and other invaders that have no business in your body. For example, if you inhale a cold virus through your nose, your immune system targets that virus and either stops it in its tracks or primes you to recover. It takes time to get over an infection, and sometimes you need medicine to help. But the immune system is the cornerstone of prevention and recovery. It's got agents standing by. Other than your nervous system, your immune system is the most complex system in your body. It's made up of tissues, cells, and organs, including your tonsils, digestive system, bone marrow, skin, lymph nodes, spleen, mucous membranes, and all of these help create and store cells that work around the clock to keep your whole body healthy. It learns from your past. You're born with a certain level of protection or immunity, but it can get better. Think of a baby or a young child who comes down with colds, earaches, or other everyday illnesses. Through this, they're making their own bank of antibodies as they're exposed to illness for the first time, enabling them to fight off future invaders. So we sort of see from this um, the basic fundamental ideas that most of us carry about what the immune system is. what I want to point out is that there's actually a narrative here that I want to offer a different narrative, basically. And the narrative is that there's bad things out there and they can get in and they can get me. The way to stay healthy is to strengthen my defenses so that I can keep bad things out. If they get in me, I need to attack them, kill them, and get them out. And my immune system is what keeps things out and helps my body fight bad things off. So the things that I just read sort of express this basic narrative. And this is a narrative I want to open up. I sort of want to say I want to question it, but really I want to open it up to other possible narratives. And and sometimes the way that we see the world is we're so used to it that we take it for granted that it's just how things are and not necessarily the expression of a narrative. And so, the narrative we have, it it sort of ends up defining our actions, like what we do because we have this narrative. And I just want to give an example from my life, which is I bought a farm a few years ago that I'm on my farm right now. I'm looking out over the pasture with some of my animals, um, and soon after I moved in and we started clearing away some brush in order to put up the fence for the pasture, a neighbor of mine um, got really scared, and she called the Conservation Commission, and we got like a cease and desist order, and it was very alarming to me. And there was a feeling of I'm being shut down, I'm being attacked, I'm being stopped from doing what I think is a good thing to do on my land, and um, the Conservation Commission is against me, my neighbor is against me, and and that was a certain narrative that was it felt really true. The narrative felt really true, but luckily at the time I had some tools, probably from my Buddhist practice, to sort of be able to see it as a narrative and then have a question like, where does this narrative lead me in terms of what actions I want to take? And actually, I'm just seeing my neighbor walk by, the one who I'm talking about. It's so funny. Um, and um, anyway, is there a potential different narrative to have about it? And so I could ask the question, how is this happening for me and not against me? And thinking that way, I thought, well, it's giving me an opportunity to kind of come in contact with my new town and the Conservation Commission and open up communication with them. And and then I also thought about my neighbor and um, realized it was really scary for her to have somebody move in next to her and kind of being afraid of what might happen, that she felt really vulnerable and scared about possible changes. I mean, the funny thing is, I mean, well, it's so beautiful here, and someone was thinking of buying this and turning it into a motocross track before I bought it. So wow, it could have been so much worse for her. But anyway, so I started doing metta meditation for my neighbor, and what that means is I just started imagining her being at peace, feeling safe, and sent really good energy just from my heart to her and in my own imagination, which really changed my body's relationship to her. And I just started communicating like with the Conservation Commission. What do you need? What do you need me to do? What are your concerns, and how can I make sure I'm working in a way that brings harmony between us? And so now the Conservation Commission really trusts me. We're in really good relationship, and my neighbor and I are on such friendly terms. And so that's just an example of like there's different choices we have about narrative, and each of them bring different possible actions. And and it isn't that like the first narrative was true on some level, but it wasn't going to be very useful. So in terms of our work with this virus, thinking about what is our narrative is really important. And I don't think that there's one narrative that is useful and another narrative that's not useful. What I think is that there are narratives that work well for certain things and other narratives that work well for other things. So this narrative about there being bad things out there that can get in and get me has been super useful because it has in it's forced us to do the social distancing so that we slowed it way down, which is probably going to save so many lives. That the fact that it's much slower than it would have been if we kept on doing everything as usual. So that it's this narrative that had us do this. Like, we need to not spread it around because there's something bad out there that can get in me and really mess me up. So I'm not trying to make a point about a better narrative or a worse narrative, but more that we don't want to take the narrative as truth, and that we want to be able to have some flexibility over what narrative we choose in different circumstances so that we can be as effective as possible. Okay, so with the narrative about the immune system, um, though, um, there are some things that I do feel kind of against. Is this just the whole idea that we can give these protective herbs? So this is a formula that this guy recommends. It's made up of in pinyin, lian chao, jinyan, hua huangqin, and he says it activates the most effective healthy immune function for this particular viral pathogen, and he's recommending that people take this. And so when we get into the physiology that I'm working from, we'll be able to see why using these bitter cold herbs just across the board, one size fits all, um, would be bad for some people. And that there's no such thing as one size fits all, this is good for everybody. So here's a bitter cold um, you know option that ultimately, if somebody is already cold and has a different kind of need in their body, this could make them more vulnerable. And then another thing that's kind of mentioned is everybody take Yu Ping Feng San, and it's the jade windscreen, and it's sort of this idea of the immune system, that the narrative of the immune system we just looked at, is let's build up a screen and help keep this out, and that's got to be good. And so one size fits all, take Yu Ping Feng San. The previous one is more like, going backwards to this is like, we need to kill this virus, and these herbs will kill that virus. So the same kind of narrative, like, I have to keep it out or I have to kill it once it's in. And another one is this is quoted: to wash away the virus, use the famous formula which was used extensively in China to protect against infection, and it's Gancao Ganjiang Tang. And this simple yet amazing formula warms and strengthens the lung qi, clears toxins in the throat, and strengthens the stomach. And we can look, here's a completely different protocol. Take hot, pungent herbs. This is quite a hot formula, and also kind of a sweet herb that nourishes, and a hot, pungent herb. And so there are going to be certain kinds of people, and I would say we'll talk about like why this is affecting men more than women from this perspective, but I think this formula could be very dangerous for some people. So in other words, we want to have a kind of a definition of the immune system and really get that there is not one size fits all. So what are our goals? And so this is from Plumflower Herbs, that is selling products, saying that their products are going to tonify the qi to protect from invasion of external pathogens, to discharge heat, disperse wind, and resolve dampness. And so they have this formula that they're calling the Wenbing Defense Immunity Formula, that supports a healthy immune system function and optimal health during cold and flu seasons. And this formula is made up, primarily of bitter and cold herbs. So, the question, like, is there really a preventative measure to take? And people are so scared, that we're looking for something. What can I take to make sure I don't get this thing, and to protect myself? And so we have to be super careful as practitioners to understand, what the herbs are, and to really ground in what our foundational principles are, so that we're working from those principles and not sort of making it too simple. It's not that simple. Um, so all of these things that I just mentioned are still following the narrative. There's bad things, they can get in me. I have to be healthy so I can keep them out. If they get in me, I need to kill them or get them out. And just what is the immune system? And some of these are like polar opposite from each other methods, but all of them being recommended in a one size fits all kind of way. So you have to kind of have an eye for that, and really question it. So how do I help my immune system? So it said in the beginning slides that the immune system is really complex and involves systems of the whole body. And these systems include respiratory, digestive, lymphatic, circulatory. So we could say that the immune system is none other than the sum total of the functions of my whole body. And so then that's sort of a question, well, how does my body function? How is my body not functioning optimally? And so basically what I'm going to be saying is, um, no, whatever your weak link is the link that needs strengthening. So if for example, every time I eat, I get bloated and distended and it moves through my body really slowly, then how it's going to inhibit my ability to create healthy cells, and then on the other hand, if I have asthma and I don't breathe very well, that's what's important to work with. In other words, everybody needs to be treated as an individual, that the immune system is not one thing that we can give one thing to support. So I feel pretty strongly about that. So now this virus, you all know I love classic formulas, and that I consider the classic formulas like that are basically the formulas that are from the Shanghan Zabinglong text by Zhang Zhongjing. And, there's a lot of questions like, can we think about this virus in terms of the Shanghanlun theory, or is it outside the scope of Shanghanlun theory? And is it that we need the Wenbing theory because it's actually more of a warm disease? So what kind of theory do we need? And is it outside the scope of Shanghanlun theory? And also kind of, do we need to integrate Western ideas? Like, I read one thing that said, Shanghanlun theory isn't enough because they don't have antivirals in their formula. So we need to have antivirals. So there's all kinds of ideas out there about what we need and what we should do. And, and there's quite a lot that this is outside the scope of Shanghanlun theory. So a question that I have is like, what is this Shanghanlun that's not enough? So it makes me think of a question that was asked once to a child. I was at a dinner table and the kid said, well, I don't believe in God. And the question was, well, who is this God that you don't believe in? And, so the answer was, it's so stupid to think that there's some guy up in a cloud sitting on a throne. And it's like, okay, well, then I don't believe in that God either. But it depends on what do you think it is? Do you think that there's some kind of intelligence in life that knows how to follow the seasons and make leaves and acorns, and knows how to, transform our food into our flesh and blood. Like there's some kind of intelligence in there. If that is considered God, like, oh, okay, I believe in God. So we have to have this question: what is this Shanghan Lun that people might be saying isn't enough to work with this? And so if you're saying this Shanghan Lun that's about cold pathogens coming in and from the outside and going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, then you're right. That Shanghan Lun is not enough. But that's not my Shanghan Lun. That's a pretty common understanding of the Shanghan Lun, but it's not my Shanghan Lun. So what I want to talk about is how I'm thinking about the Shanghanlun, what the fundamental theory is in the Shanghanlun, how it thinks about the body and how this relates to this virus. And then, think about, is this actually, quote, enough with that question? So we have to question, what is the Shanghanlun you're thinking of that isn't enough? Um, so in terms of TCM and Wenbing theory about this virus, it's still following this narrative, the same narrative that there's bad things out there. Now they're being called pathogens, and they can get in me and really mess with me. And I need to do my best to keep them out. And if they get in, I need to attack them and get them out. And so TCM and Wenbing theory is basically following the same narrative. And also, another part of the narrative is that the symptoms are revealing the nature of the pathogen. So we have different kinds of pathogens: wind heat pathogens, damp warmth pathogens, hot pathogens, toxic heat pathogens, cold damp pathogens, all these different kinds of pathogens that can get in me and mess with me that I need to get out. And the symptoms themselves are showing me the nature of the pathogen. So if I have, a yellow greasy coating on my tongue when I'm sick, well, that's telling me that the pathogen is like a damp, warm pathogen. So in other words, in TCM and Wenbing theory, the symptoms are revealing the nature of the pathogen. And that's part of the foundational theory in TCM and in Wenbing. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this idea. What kind of pathogen is it? Where is it? And how do I attack it and get it out? And some towards, how do I support the body to attack it and get it out? But still, that idea is in there. But it's really interesting if you think about it, kind of, what do we actually think is going on? Like, let's say we think it's a damp, warm pathogen. Do we think that there's this thing coming into our body and it's kind of spraying damp, hot stuff around our bodies? Like, what does it mean that the pathogen has that nature? Like, what's it actually doing in our body? Is it bringing in heat? Is it bringing in all this damp and spreading it all around? And for me, that doesn't actually make any sense. So I'm going to be looking at it from a different way and sort of questioning that. And I'm not saying it's not a useful narrative about it. It can be very, very helpful, but I think that the Shanghanlun theory offers us a different narrative. So it's also kind of part of the modern TCM narrative that now we have to find and identify, what the nature of this pathogen is, what qualities it has, and attack it and get it out. But also, it's a virus, so we have to add antivirals. And if we don't, we won't have success. So I'm sure you're all familiar with this. And, my point is just really for us to become aware of the narratives that we're bringing to this and really have some free choice. Is this is this how I want to approach it? And why do I want to approach it this way? So we're not sort of flung around like, these people are doing this and these people are doing that. And what do I do? How do I look at this? Um, just to sort of tease it out and see the underlying ideas that are there. Oops, I want to skip that. Okay. So the narrative that I want to um, talk about, that you'll see is different than this, is a narrative about, the world and life. I mean, the previous was about that, that here I am and I'm vulnerable and there's bad things out there that can get in. And, you know, um, and so what we want to see is that that's a narrative and not necessarily the truth. Um, and I'm not saying my narrative is the truth either. I'm just saying it's flexible. So the narrative I want to offer is about the nature of life as interconnected, and about health being about being in a workable relationship with life, and about healing being about coming into this workable relationship. So going back to the metaphor about my neighbor, know that um, it could be this bad thing is happening to me and now they're my enemies and I have to keep them away from me. But it can be about how do I come into relationship with that. And the fact is that this virus is actually part of our world, isn't it? And so, we could also think about becoming immune to things as being a process of our body making a shift so that now I can live with that without it causing me problems. That the illness itself is the process of me shifting so that I can now live with it. All the viruses that have been here, the flus and bacteria are still around and they don't make us sick anymore. The flu that we had last year is still around, but it doesn't make me sick anymore because my body has learned how to live with it. And I'll tell you, that this is actually how I work with my relationship with deer ticks, that they're here. And so, I'm really lucky to have access to some foundational principles and then methods to work with what comes up in my own body and in the bodies of my patients. So I get many tick bites every year and have for 10 years. And and what I feel like now is like, wow, my body knows how to live with ticks. It doesn't bother me at all. I get a little sore and I feel like my body has changed so that now I can live in harmony with deer ticks. And so, and I don't ever tell my patients don't take antibiotics, or, I'm not fanciful about it. And I encourage patients to do what they feel makes them feel the safest. But on the other hand, a lot of the treatments that they're doing are not necessarily working to keep them well after they've been bitten by a tick and gotten sick. And so, you know, their body has not learned how to come into relationship with this. And so the medicine, the Chinese medicine with this foundational principles I'm talking about, can help adjust their body so that it's workable. They can be in a workable relationship. And the fact is, we have to come into a relationship, and we will come into a relationship with this. And so the question then becomes not so much how can I keep it out of me, although that's a very important question, as I talked about, it's slowing it way down. But then there's another question like, how do I help my body? When I do get sick, how do I help my body process this so it doesn't hurt me so much so that I can come out the other side well and now able to live with it? And I think we have a lot to offer in this. So that's kind of a very simple summary like that about the narrative. I'm suggesting that we also consider, how do we come into a workable relationship with this? So what is this virus? It's something we're being asked to and forced to learn to come into relationship with. So there's no doubt about that. And from this point of view, what's the immune system in this narrative? It's still the sum of all of the body functions that all help me to be in relationship with life. And that when I become immune to something, the previous narrative is now my body knows how to fight it off. But another way to think of it is now my body knows how to live in harmony with it. It doesn't bother my body anymore because my body's learned to be in harmony with it. So then what are symptoms? I mean, this is like people are getting really, really sick. And so from this point of view, the symptoms tell us two different things. So I'm kind of countering the idea that the symptoms are showing us the nature of the pathogen and where the pathogen is. But the symptoms are telling us how my body's having a hard time coming into relationship with this thing. So the symptoms are telling the practitioner that, wow, this function isn't working to help you come into relationship with this thing. So the symptoms are telling me that, but they're also telling me something about the pathogen that's coming in, the virus, which is what demands does this particular virus make on my body? So my body needs to come into relationship with it, because it has certain demands on certain aspects of the body. And that's where we can sort of come down to some key formulas that will help my body come into relationship with it without it hurting my body so much. And because it does have certain characteristics, but those characteristics from this point of view are the nature of the virus, like what demands it's making on my body. So we do have heat, we do have damp, but we'll have a different idea of where those things actually come from, rather than coming from the pathogen itself. So what are our goals when we're working with people? So my goals are, how do I help the body come into relationship with this? And so I diagnose how is the body having a hard time, and I'm giving treatment measures to help it function so it can process this very well and not kill me. So, yeah. So in this narrative, I'm seeing the body as functioning in a circular way. And so on the one hand, if we see this circle turning like a wheel, like that, we could see that our bodies are always living with nature. We are nature. Like we're constantly taking nature and life into ourselves and processing it and excreting it and also expressing it back out. We're giving back to nature through our actions and relationships and so we're constantly taking things in and putting them back out again. And so nature is like always coming into us. And actually, in order to be healthy, rather than thinking, how do I keep nature out? And this virus is now part of nature. Rather than thinking, how do I keep it out? Even if we try to do that, we're kind of stopping processes that are necessary for our life. And one thing that I've seen in my years of practice is that the mindset itself of there's all these bad things out there that could get in me and I need to have these really strong boundaries to keep them out, that mindset itself is actually a cause of disease. It makes people ill. And so the kind of posture you need and what you do with your own energy with that attitude is a cause of illness. So here, there's a picture of a wheel and it sort of describes we take things in always, and it's in a vertical downward motion, and we take it down through our breath, through our digestion, through our pores, through all of our senses we're taking in life, and also through our hearts we're taking in, for me, from my interpretation of the Shanghanlun is, we're taking in the life force, which is warm, through our hearts, and it's coming in on a downward vertical axis to join with our bodies, where we process it, and then we also then give it back out to life. So we give back out to life through our excretions, also through our hearts, in terms of our relationships, our actions, and the things that we decide to create in our life. We're always giving back to nature. So I'm kind of suggesting that we just have this view of our bodies as constantly taking in and going out, constantly taking in, and that our ability to do this well is the mark of a healthy immune system and of health in general, our ability to do this. So there we go. We can see going out again, coming in, going out. In one of the blog posts, I suggested the image of a water wheel, picking up and dropping off. And so health is being able to do this well, and also realizing that health is having this permeable relationship with life. That we have to be open to life, we have to be able to take it in, we have to be able to excrete it well, and that problems come when either our body doesn't process very well, or when our bodies are something is being demanded of our bodies that's beyond our body's capacity to process. And so certainly this virus is coming in with very particular demands. It's very demanding, and it's asking our bodies, to process something. And so where the herbs are very helpful is that they can very much help the body shift in a way to allow this to move through without hurting us so much. So diagnosis is then finding the answer to where on this wheel do I need help. So I'm talking in very broad general terms right now, and I'll get more specific. Where on this wheel do I need help? Let's see. The signs and symptoms are what give us the answer to that. How the person is presenting gives us the answer to that. So rather than the signs and symptoms telling us about the nature of the pathogen that we have to get rid of, the signs and symptoms are telling me where on this wheel does the body need help to process this. And Zhang Zhongjing instructed us very clearly on how to interpret symptoms in the Shanghanlun. And it's my way of working. I was going to say opinion, but it's my interpretation, my way of working with the text is that the signs and symptoms are written not as you have to see these kinds of signs and symptoms for this particular pattern, but they're actually written in a kind of a metaphorical code, so that the no sweating is code for the surface is closed, and thirst is, strong thirst is code for there's heat in the stomach. So we're not necessarily looking for those exact symptoms, but Zhang Zhongjing is trying to paint us a picture of the energetic of what's going on, as opposed to exact signs and symptoms. The signs and symptoms are very important that he mentions, but they're sort of giving us an overall picture of the dynamic of the particular place in this wheel. And you'll see this wheel is divided up into 6 spaces, and those, of course I chose a wheel that had this so that I could describe the 6 conformations in this way. So what is this virus doing to my body that, according to this narrative, it's demanding that we process it and live in harmony with it. And what are the symptoms? They show two things: where my body's having a hard time processing and what processing functions this virus makes the most demand on. And why does it kill people? Because their bodies couldn't process it in some way or another. And their bodies didn't get the help they needed in order to process it. You know, and I think from a Western point of view, there's not a lot to help our bodies process it. You know, I think there are some things like having a humidifier is really helpful. Mucinex can be really helpful. You know, Robitussin can be really helpful. But you know, and those are great things. They are really helpful, and it does help our body through it. But mostly, there is not a lot offered from a Western point of view. It's much more, if you get it, you're unlucky. We can cross our fingers and hope it doesn't get bad in you. And if it does, you know, we can put you on a ventilator and hopefully keep you alive. But there's not a lot about how to help the body process it so it doesn't become so severe. And that's where we have incredible tools. And, you know, so far for us, those tools are working really well to help people's bodies process it. So just I want to do a little bit of comparing the Shanghanlun theory with the Wenbing theory. So in my Shanghanlun theory, like, you know, which is not the theory of a cold pathogen coming from the outside and going deeper, 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 as opposed to a hot pathogen in Wenbing theory, my Shanghanlun theory is that the conformations, Taiyang, Yangming, Shaoyang, Taiyin, Shaoyin, and Jueyin are all different parts of this circle, and that they are functions in the body. They're not locations in the body, they're functions in the body. And they are all functioning to help me take in life, process it, and give it back out again. And so the conformations, the 6 of them, are always working together to help me, to help that wheel keep on turning, to help it keep going around and around. So that's my Shanghanlun theory. So it's not the kind of Shanghanlun theory you learned in school, and it's the kind of Shanghanlun theory, it's not the Shanghanlun theory that's being rejected as not enough. You know, because yes, that other Shanghanlun theory is not enough, but this theory, to me, is more than enough. The Wenbing theory, in contrast, is, well, go back, you know, is that I have this immune system that I want to increase to keep things out. But if it's weak, there are these pathogens that get into my body. And my goal is then to get them out. You know, so I want to point out that these are very different theories. You know, and that a lot of the ideas about Shanghanlun theory are the paradigm of the Wenbing theory, that pathogens getting in that I have to get out. For me, that's a misunderstanding of the Shanghanlun theory. And if you look at it that way, it's not going to work very well. The Shanghanlun theory is not going to work very well. You know, so the Wenbing theory is just a completely different way of looking at the body, of looking at what the pathogen is, what it does in the body. And also you know, the Shanghanlun was written over 2,000 years ago, and the Wenbing theory is very much relatively modern, you know, from like the 1500s. And so, you know, historically, we could, if we put a certain lens on history, we could see, you know, the development of us and them, the development of inside outside, you know, growing. And so the Wenbing theory is much more that, you know, looking at the Shanghanlun, well, there's cold pathogens that get in, but what about these warm ones? We need a whole new theory to take those into account. And I don't think that's true. In Shanghanlun theory, we definitely can have, you know, all the pathology that's described in the Wenbing text, all the signs and symptoms that come, we can explain those signs and symptoms very easily in Shanghanlun theory. In addition, the formulas, which are awesome formulas from that came out of the Wenbing school, a lot of those formulas are wonderful and very useful. We can still understand them with this Shanghanlun theory that I'm talking about. In the lectures that are coming up that a group of us are giving, some will be by me and some with some of other practitioners that are in our COVID club. Some of the formulas that we'll be looking at through this lens and trying to help teach you to identify the pattern so you can know when to give the formula. That some of those formulas come from the Wenbing school. So the Shanghanlun theory is not exclusive to using Shanghanlun formulas. In fact, it's my feeling that the more reductionist a theory is, the more it separates itself from other theories. And, it's either this or it's that. And the more open a theoretical foundation is and non-reductionist, the more it can incorporate other theories. So I think that this Shanghanlun theory that I'm sharing with you is a very open theory, and it can integrate Wenbing theory, and it can integrate even Western medicine. That yes, there's times you want to go on a ventilator, there's times you want to stay away from that pathogen, and that the theories aren't mutually exclusive, and the more open a theory is, the more you can integrate other ideas. That's my opinion. So let's now, what we'll do for the rest of this is very briefly go through what these different conformations do in the body, what their function is. So if you think of the body as, think of the life force as warm, because when we're dead, we're cold. So what makes me a living being is that I have this warmth, and that warmth gives me animation, and it also takes care of all the transformations in my body. It depends on my body being warm. And if I don't have warmth, nothing functions and I'm dead. So the life force, we could say, is warm. We can also kind of identify that the life force is moved around according to the movement of the great yang, the Tai Yang, which is the sun. So that my body wakes up in the morning because the sun comes up, and the sun zeniths in the south and sets in the west and goes under the horizon at night, and I get sleepy. I go to sleep. Hopefully I stay asleep all night and then wake up again in the morning. And all the theory in Chinese medicine from the Neijing is always about cycles. There's nothing that's linear in Chinese medicine. So the idea that the Shanghanlun is about something coming in from the outside and linearly going deeper, deeper, deeper until it's at the center and deepest, deepest level is kind of a contradiction to the foundation of Chinese medicine, in which everything is connected to nature and everything goes in cycles. So if we put this cycle idea onto the conformations, we start to be able to see some amazing things. So if we think of Taiyang as, think of that horizontal rod in this wheel as the horizon, and that Taiyang is about my life force going up and out. And so what is a Taiyang problem is when that up and out is not functioning very well. And so then what kinds of methods do we want to use if the up and out isn't going well? Well, we need pungent, warm herbs, often light herbs that are going to restore the function of Taiyang for going up and out. And so, then we can go through the cycle, then, okay, so there's that motion in my body. It happens in a big way in the morning, but it's happening all the time. There's always this up and out in my body, which is Taiyang. And, so then we have some subtle variations, difference between Shanghan or Zhongfeng, which is basically the difference between when do we think about Ma Huang, when do we think about like Ma Huang Tong versus Guizhi Tong, so there are different ways it can fail to go up and out the way it's supposed to. And the first lecture that's being given, I think on Monday by Sally Rappaport, is going to be like Ma Hong Tong, Guizhi Tong, like you've never learned it before. And so it's going to be really about these kinds of principles. So you can really understand, what does it look like if it's more like Ma Huang? What does it look like if it's more Guizhi Tong? But for now, we just want to understand Taiyang as a function of going up and out. And that when we have a problem in Taiyang, it's not, there's a wind, cold, evil that got in my body that I need to get out. It's how do I restore the function of Taiyang? And, and you can choose the formula with that idea, like getting a wind, cold pathogen out, and you can be very successful. But I still want to kind of suggest these foundational principles. That if I'm suggesting, let's think about it as restoring the function of Taiyang, and just try that on for size. So how do we tell if it's a Taiyang problem? Like, meaning, especially with this virus, is it still on the exterior? So is the Taiyang part of the failure to function? And so I want to give you the things that I look at. Of course, we have lots of different things, fever and chills and sweating or not sweating, all those kinds of symptoms, sore throat, sneezing, all these kinds of symptoms that are all important. However, the ones that are the most important to me, that tell me in some way I want to restore the function of Taiyang, are the feeling of coming down with something and achy body. Now there's also the pulse, but we're not being able to feel pulses because we're doing a lot of virtual medicine. And so mostly we're not being able to feel pulses unless someone is getting sick that we're in physical proximity with. So, understanding these are very, very important. So this feeling of coming down with something is a very vague feeling. It's like you can't put your finger on it. Like, everybody knows what it feels like, but you can't say what it feels like. It's like this general malaise. And usually if you ask people, do you have the feeling you're coming down with something? They'll be clear, like, oh my God, yes, I have that feeling. And often once it's purely now an internal problem, there isn't the feeling of coming down with something anymore. It's like, no, I'm not coming down with something, I've got something. And so, so it can be subtle, and it can be really, I think, challenging to discover if somebody has this or not. So it's too bad. The pulse can be very, very helpful. And then also the achy body. So you have something acute coming in and you're feeling an achy body. And that can be subtle too. Just like I don't like being touched. It's not so much like my joints really hurt or I'm in a lot of pain, but it can just be like, ugh, I feel uncomfortable on the surface of my body. And that would tell you that somehow in your formula, you need to restore, to get the wheel turning again, to help the body process it. You need some kind of up and out method. And so what are the formulas? There are these pungent warm formulas that go up and out. So we're restoring the function of Taiyang. And, other things like chills or fever or sweating or not sweating, all those, they can come when the exterior still needs that resolution, but they can also come from other things. So we can't rely on those for that decision, that we still need some up and out. So this is how I work with it. And so we can see that up and out part of the wheel is the Taiyang. So then we have the Yang Ming coming next. And so if you imagine the sun is coming up and out, and now it's like noon, so that everything is really hot, and now things are starting to come down. So the Yang Ming is about down and in, and all Yang Ming pathology is about it not functioning to come down and in. You know, it says in the Shanghanlun that the Yang Ming is the domain of, the stomach is the domain of excess, the stomach being Yang Ming. And that means that everything about the Yang Ming is about it getting blocked on its way down in one way or another. Now, with this virus, most of the things we're going to be seeing about it getting blocked on its way in and down are going to be in the chest area and also in the epigastric area, the digestion. So, you know, this question of where does the heat come from? Where does the damp come from? Here we can say the heat is none other than my own life force that is being blocked. So it gets built up and gets really hot. You know, if you suddenly blocked the sun from going down at noon and just kept it there, it would get hotter and hotter and hotter, right? And so same with Yang Ming. If it gets blocked with the life force on its way in and down, it starts to get really hot. And that is a big thing that happens with this virus. And this kind of goes to why I think men are more susceptible to dying from this than women, is that I think there's a certain kind of block in the chest that requires Shurgao, the herb, the gypsum, and that kind of block, you know, from I've been practicing now for years, and it's like it's so common in men to have this kind of block. And you know, so I'm just realizing I shouldn't go into that so much right now, but it's really common for men to have that block as well as a Shaoyang block, more common in men than in women. So often these kinds of men that have like a red face, a big chest, you know, and fullness below their ribs, you know, which is more common in men than women, they're going to have the hardest time processing this virus, you know, and that's what I think, but it's not really based on good evidence. It's a little bit of evidence, but not enough to actually draw a conclusion. It's like a hypothesis, I would say. And I'd be interested to see, like, what are the men like what are they like constitutionally who are dying more easily? And, you know, but definitely men tend to have yang conformations blocked more than women. Um, and, you know, the yang conformations are all about things being open through and not blocked. And the yin conformations are more about consolidating and storing our energy. They relate to the zang, which are the storage organs. You know, so men in general are more yang, and so they have more of a tendency to blockage. Women have more of a tendency to deficiency, lack of storage. So anyway, with Yang Ming going down and in, we may have a formula like Bai Hutong. And so Bai Hutong, the chief herb is Shurgao, the gypsum, which in my way of thinking about it, gypsum is not, it's not so cold. It's actually the function of gypsum is to open up the vents in the chest, heart, and lungs. You know, so it opens up the vents when they're all clogged up. And so I'm going to give you some quotes from some doctors that talk about gypsum maybe not being as cold as we think. You know, some people think it's like putting ice on the heat. And actually, if we think, why is the heat there in the first place? It's there because this area is blocked. Like the screens are all gunked up, the windows aren't open, and gypsum opens those screens. And it's amazing when you give a formula that's right for this. And it's like such a relief. Like the person is like, oh my God, I can breathe. Oh my God, I feel relaxed. You know, I was so agitated and hot and couldn't breathe. And oh, now I can breathe. So I've, you know, lots of case examples from my practice of this. But, you know, we'll take it at my word. This is what that herb does. And so, you know, we're not thinking about clearing heat. We're thinking about opening up this particular Yang Ming function. So Yang Ming is going down and in, and there's different kind of stations along that vertical axis. You know, there's the epigastric region, there's the large intestine, there's the bladder. all the vertical downward has to be open through. And so there are different kinds of formulas for the different places where it's not open through. For this virus, the main one we're going to be thinking of is the chest and the epigastric area. And we want to know then, how do we tell if it's not open? And that's what we'll be doing, when we go through the formulas. It's like, how do you really tell if it's not open? And so I had my first COVID case as a woman who called, really having a hard time breathing. Now her chest happened to be full of phlegm that was very difficult to expectorate, and she also had a slight feeling of coming down with something, very, very slight. And she didn't have an achy body, but she just didn't want to be touched. So I knew the exterior is still not quite resolved. And so, but also, her appetite was poor, and when she could get phlegm out, it was yellow, and she was frightened because her breathing was getting worse and worse. So the formula that I gave her is actually, I'll talk about on the next slide, was the Mashing Shirgantang, but I did it with Xiao Shen Chong Tong, which is on this page. It was more in the Yang Ming. It was in her chest, but it was also this phlegm heat that was in her lungs and also affecting her digestion. And so we wanted to open up the Yang Ming in two different ways, but I also wanted to go up and out in order to go down and in, because it was still there. So we can match our formulas to kind of exactly what's going on. And that was a case where, I called her like an hour after she took the herbs, and, and she said, oh my God, it felt so good. Like I could breathe again. And, the next day, then we just gave her the next day just Xiaozhen Chongtong, because she could expectorate, but there was a lot of yellow phlegm. So that was going to help her process it for the next phase. Now she's better. She's tired, but she's basically out of the woods with this virus. So these are the principles, the foundational principles that I'm using. How can I help her body move through this? So, and then also I want to say, where does all the damp come from? Well, we could say that the virus makes a demand on the stomach and spleen that sometimes the stomach spleen can't handle. And when that gets shut down, we can't process our own body fluids, and therefore dampness develops. So that's how I think about it, as opposed to it being a damp pathogen. So just to offer that as a perspective of where this comes from. Because for me, like, the idea that the pathogen brings in all this stuff and sprays it around because that's what it's like doesn't make as much sense. When do you see the damp? When the spleen and stomach aren't functioning very well. That's when you see it. So I think, you can look at it either way, and it's not which one's true, who knows? But I find this a very useful way to look at it. So here are some formulas that work both with the Taiyang up and out and the Yang Ming down and in. And we'll be looking at these formulas in more detail in the follow-up classes that we're offering. So one of these, the Sanrentang, that comes from the Wenbing. So we'll be interpreting Sanrentang through this physiological paradigm. So just to show this is an open system, and it's not about which formulas you use, it's more how do you think about them. When you think about them this way, you can be very precise and very helpful. So you can see the up and out on one side and the down and in on the other. So then we get to, this is just the quotes about Shigao. So I'll just take a moment and read these. The records of thoughtful differentiation of materia medica quotes Zhou Shu when he says, Shigao is most heavy substance, bright, shiny, and moist. After striking it to break it up, the particles scatter far and wide, and it breaks into vertical columns of slivers without a single horizontal thread. So if you go to the gypsum mines, you'll see they're all vertical without any horizontal slivers. And so this guy says this is the reason its nature primarily releases pathogenic heat, which has seeped horizontally. And this effect is strengthened by its flavors, which are sweet and acrid. So we have this idea, with the virus, the life force is coming in through the chest and it gets blocked. And instead of going vertically, it goes horizontal. And it gets so full because that's not the pathway. No, the pathway is vertical. And if it's like a hose that gets blocked and it starts ballooning out horizontally instead of vertically. So we can think of Shirgao as opening up that vertical pathway in the chest. Okay, then Steve Clavey wrote, concern about the powerful clinical effects of Shirgao has been shared by beginning herbal physicians throughout the ages, but more experienced voices counsel us to know our tools precisely, then use them resolutely, as a faltering attempt with insufficient safe doses will often achieve nothing at all. This is not a recommendation to be, flagrant or flippant about our treatments, but also to understand our medicinals really well and when to use them at the right time. And so here, Zhang Shichun argues that Shirgao is not actually extremely cold, like Huanglian, Huangbai, Longdan Sao, Ban Langun, Lian Chao, all those bitter cold herbs. But at the same time, its ability to reduce heat surpasses these herbs. He bases his argument on the Shennon Bancao Jing statement that the Shirgao can be used in postpartum women with externally contracted heat. He's still thinking it's externally contracted, which I don't agree with. While the bitter cold herbs mentioned are all contraindicated, because there's a Juya Shirgatong is for postpartum women with nursing difficulties. Shirgao alone is not forbidden, therefore it cannot be extremely cold. He continues that the cooling effects of the bitter cold herbs drive cold from, sorry, that's written wrong, but basically allow the cold to overcome the heat, whereas Shirgao reduces the heat by, I would say, allowing it to travel out of the body, by opening up the vents. That's what it feels like in the body. And then we have another doctor talking about, I won't read this one, but basically he gave his kid to all told 180 grams of raw Shirgao over a couple of days and without any upset to the spleen and stomach. So, now I've had years of experience thinking of Shirgao this way and realize it's so, when you use it correctly in the right circumstances, it never damages the spleen and the stomach. It's not so cold like those other herbs. At the same time, it's not really a clearing heat herb. It's specific for opening up the chest and clearing the heat in the chest that's affecting the heart and the lungs and drying up the fluids in the stomach. So you have to make sure it's the right location of Yangming, because there's different locations. And we'll talk in the future, how do we tell about that? So then we have Yangming not going down and in, and also the Shaoyang not pivoting. So what does the Shaoyang do? So if we think of the life force coming in, it's coming in to become our ministerial fire, which then goes up in our bodies like a fire under a cooking pot. So what has to happen is that fire has to be able to change direction so that it can now go up and out. And that pivot of changing direction is the function of the Shaoyang. So Shaoyang disorders are when that pivot is like a rusty hinge and it doesn't pivot very well. And certainly we know like Chai Hu Huangqin, how I think about them is they're awesome for making that pivot turn. And we can see if the life force heat is coming down the body and then it can't get into right relationship, it will build up and turn into heat. In addition, that ministerial fire inside is not going to be able to function well in the body. So the kind of quintessential Shaoyang formula, Shao Chai Hutang, it it helps the pivot to turn so the fire can come into relationship. And then it looks at the next confirmation, which is tie in, and says, wow, you've been missing my fire because it's been stuck on the outside. So now I'm going to help strengthen the spleen and the stomach that's been missing that fire. So it has herbs like dangshen, shengjiang, zhigansa to help to strengthen the tie in. But here we're looking at Yang Ming going down and Xiaoyang not pivoting. Like if that doesn't happen, that can be a really big problem for the body. And this is also very common in men. And so this kind of pattern is often, it's not so much the shurgao, but often if there's a lot of fullness in the rib side and a big distended belly, big guy with a big belly and a red face, you know, that person's going to have a hard time processing this virus and is going to be a lot at risk. So we have formulas like Da Chai Hutong, which can be so helpful. Dr. Hushishu writes about a lot about using, Shaoyang formulas to treat lung issues. It's very interesting, and I've used so many of his ideas, with this kind of physiology to treat acute respiratory problems. So it's very, very useful kind of way of thinking. So yeah, Da Chai Hu Tong, Chai Hu Mang Xiao Tong, or this double yang confirmation, Yang Ming Xiao Yang kind of pattern. So the wheel turns, but it also pivots and starts going the other direction. That pivot, being open and flexible, is the function of the Xiaoyang. Then also we can have Xiaoyang with Taiyang formulas that have been being very useful for our patients with this virus, like Chai Hu Guizhitong. It's like helping the pivot and going up and out, or a formula like Chai Ling Tong, which is Xiao Tai Hu Tong with Wu Ling San, also can be very, very helpful. And Wu Ling San helps to steam up the fluid that's gathering. And so it can really be like a damp heat kind of presentation. So anyway, those are the yang confirmations, and those for this virus are the most important that we need to know about. And I would really like to give practitioners, you have a lot of understanding of Chinese medicine, and it's not a big shift to start looking at it that way, and just give you some tools for really being able to understand some of these formulas that used properly are being extremely helpful. So, then finally, we have the yin confirmations. And this is my last slide. And so the yin confirmations are all related to storage of the life force and being able to absorb and contain and hold the life force, where the yang confirmations are more about being able to be open through. In general, this isn't entirely true. I'm giving like broad stroke principles. Now, what I find is that with these patients in general with acute respiratory problems, I will be also treating the yin confirmations, but primarily in relation to the combination with Taiyang. In other words, helping them develop and store the resources that are going to help them go up and out. In general, if it's more in the Yang Ming or Xiaoyang, I'm going to open that up and help it flow before I'm treating the yin confirmations. But I will often treat the yin confirmations if they're weak in order to help kind of give that fuel to the up and out that's needed if it's weak, only if it's weak, not as a matter of course, only if I see it as weak. So that's it. I'm going to stop the share, and I'd like to open it up for any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sharon. That was great. So, guys, this is the raise your hand part. That was awesome. So, there's a couple housekeeping questions. People want to know, like, okay, how do I register for the other one? So we haven't listed them all. Sharon and I are going to chat after. My understanding, now this is written in stone, but my understanding, the next one is going to be by Sally Rappaport. And the working title is Ma Wong Tong and Guizhou Tong, as you've never heard before, using them for the virus that can't be named. Although we'll put it in type what the virus name is. So Ma Wong Tong and Guizhou Tong, as you've never heard them before, my understanding is going to be with Sally. It'll be at 9 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, so 30 minutes before this. You will be able to find that on the Healthy Seminars resource page. And it'll also be on where we're going to create a page for a collective for this. This is healthyseminars.com/Sharon right now is where it is, but we may change that URL. So the best thing is go to the resources because they'll be listed there once we have them, which will link you to where you can register. And as you can tell, you're registering to get your Zoom link. It doesn't guarantee you get in the room. The first 500 get into the room, and then we keep it up for 48 hours, and we will stream it live on Facebook and YouTube. So if you can't get in, like some people couldn't get in today, you can just go to the Healthy Seminars Facebook page or YouTube page and watch the live stream if this is maxed out. So if you have questions, raise your hand. And I do want to remind you guys that Sharon's website is whitepinehealingarts.org. She's got amazing blogs. She has her GMP program that she'll be doing next year. I highly recommend. And on healthyseminars.com, on her bio page, if you go to presenters, this is where we're going to place this recording for 48 hours. And all of her courses are on sale during isolation at 25% off. Her clarifying diagnosis course is amazing. And if you have taken her clarifying diagnosis, her old course, which was around 19 or 20 CUs, this one is 54 CUs, much more comprehensive, we will take off the price of what you paid for it on the Healthy or Old Pro D site. Plus you get the 25% off. So you can really get her course at a special price, especially if you've taken it before. And then all of her courses are Herbal. If you're going to do telehealth, then Herbal's amazing. By the way, Sharon, this was great. I love your analogies. I can't wait to review this again. I'm just sitting here. I'm like loving this. This is great. I love the fact it's not like this herb, this formula for the virus that can't be named. You're bringing us back to the foundation of the medicine. Lovely. We're going to unmute everybody just so everybody can say hi to each other again. And then we do want, we have hands raised. You know what? We're going to go right to the hand raising. So team, I'll leave it to you guys. Just go ahead and grab hands. Sandra, Lorraine, whoever's going to moderate.
So we have a couple of questions written first, so I can share my screen, and then the hands raised are there in proper order, so we can go through those. But you want to answer the ones on screen first?
No, I want to do a couple of hands first because I want to get the interaction going, and then we'll go to the written.
Let's do Judith first. Let's do the first one.
Who is it?
Judith is on now.
Yes.
Judith.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
So, Sharon, for someone in recovery who is very depleted and weak, two parts to the question, please. One, when is it safe to start nourishing the patient and nourishing and tonifying and strengthening them? And number two, what formulas, please?
Yeah, so again, we're kind of going with the foundational principles. And so we are always looking at in what way are they weak, and so, for example, let's say we see signs that their blood is really deficient, then we're going to nourish their blood, and if their blood is deficient and they're really cold and they're really dried up, we might, want to moisten and nourish and warm with something like Wenjing Tong, so it doesn't ever go out of these principles of working with exactly what we see. And, and that's kind of tricky because what exactly are we seeing, because it's, I think diagnosis is difficult to know, am I seeing accurately or not accurately? But we use all the same principles that we would use with anybody, even if they didn't have this virus. I mean, this virus in this way isn't any different than anything we've ever seen. It's very strong. That's what's different. It's like making such big demands, but there's nothing different in terms of the functions of the body and how it affects the functions of the body, I don't think. And so far, that's the way we've been working with it very well. So, it's the same principles that you would use if it was, anything else. Like if somebody in your practice has a cold or a flu, and they are, they might still have a little phlegm in their lungs, but they're mostly better, but they just feel really wiped out. What would you do? You'd look at, well, in what way are they wiped out, and how might I help them? So I think one principle, because I don't want to like avoid your question altogether, but one principle is, if they're feeling basically better, like I'm not sick anymore, I'm just wiped out, then you can do whatever you want, in terms of tonification, not whatever you want, but you can do what's according to the pattern very safely. So very often if you have a cold, afterwards you're tired, you might still have some phlegm, but you don't feel sick anymore. That means I could use a little help clearing the phlegm out of my lungs, and I can be supported in the ways that I'm feeling weak according to the diagnosis. So I hope that answered your question, Judith.
Sandra, who's next? Sandra, I'm gonna let you go through this and just give people mic rights, just go in order. And if you had posted your question in the chat room, just put up your hand. It may be just easier for us just to answer your hands this way.
So, my next?
Sandra, you need to announce who. Sandra, you need to announce who.
No,
who's
I
next.
could hear in the background. Maybe is it Jamin? Jamin. Hi, can you hear us? Okay, yeah, because we can hear really low. Can you go near to the microphone?
Oh, is this better?
That's better.
Okay, so well, Sharon, first off, I just want to say thank you. Your knowledge, your passion, and everything that you present is just really infectious. I've enjoyed everything I've heard from you in the past, and certainly currently as well. So thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question. I have an herbalist practitioner whose English is not their first language, but I was talking to them about the approaches that were supposedly being used in the front lines for the hospital workers in China, and having supposedly good results in keeping them from getting sick. And the way this person described it to me, that it actually, the protective kind of formula that was being described was actually not so much helping them, maybe not as much getting symptoms, but it was actually allowing the virus to go more penetrate directly to the organs. Do you have any knowledge, thoughts, or understanding of that?
So the formula was helping prevent it from
it was
going
listed
deeper into the organs?
No, supposedly in using the formula, it actually allowed the virus to go more penetrate deeply to the organs, but they weren't necessarily showing symptoms of getting sick, and so they were able to work more consistently in the hospital setting.
Oh gosh, I have no idea.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
I just can't even wrap my mind around that paradigm. Like, kind of make it go deeper so it doesn't bother me on the surface. It's like, it doesn't. It's weird, isn't it?
I found it to be a little strange.
Yeah.
I respect this person's understanding of herbs very much so, but I'm sorry I don't have the formula in front of me. It was something that was listed by John Chen's seminar thing. I think he was the one who put that out there.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's it just doesn't feel right to think that there's a thing that can protect us. It's kind of against the principles of Chinese medicine, isn't it?
It is.
And so, or that there's a formula that will successfully treat this virus, in everybody. Or maybe 3 formulas that will do it. I know some people are pulling together to create a group of formulas, and that kind of seem to match the different things that we're seeing and hearing, to make those formulas widely available to people in North America. And, and I think that's wonderful because, if we don't really have the skills to carefully diagnose exactly where it is, we have to have something, and we do have some skills. And so I think that's a really, that's totally legitimate way of thinking about it if you don't have time to kind of learn a whole different way of thinking about it. But that particular one, I have no idea.
Okay.
Haven't heard of it, don't understand it. Yeah.
I'm gonna unmute. Oh, I can hear husband is on the background now.
Hi, can you
Yeah,
hear me?
hi. Yes.
Hi, thank you. First of all, thank you, Sharon. This is the first time I'm listening something from you. I've been reading your posts for the last few weeks, but thank you. So I've been studying with Dr. Suzanne Rubido, the Dr. Hushishu's teachings. So it was really nice to hear from another awesome practitioner how they practice Hushishu's teachings. So my question is, when I study with Dr. Suzanne Rubido, she was saying that if there's Taiyang conformation, like the Ma Huang type, and also Shaoyang, half and half, we actually need to focus on harmonizing. So we shouldn't be using Ma Huang and Chai Hu together. But and I asked this question to her too, but I would love to hear your view. Like Qing Fei Pai Dusan, people post a lot, it combines both Ma Huang and Chai Hu based formulas. So I would like to hear if you substitute Ma Huang with maybe high dosage of Goju or Shanjian or another herb, or you actually combine them together. And then the second question would be the dosage of Shiga you use. Thank you.
Okay. So there's a bunch of questions in there, sort of like what would you substitute for Ma Huang is a question, and would I substitute it if it's with Chai Hu? And so I think I haven't used Ma Huang in a formula with Chai Hu, I don't think. So I wouldn't say like that's forbidden necessarily, but I think it's not commonly seen. I haven't seen it with this. I haven't seen it in general. And so, but you can tell that the way of thinking about things is different from, Dr. Feng Sherlun's idea about the conformations is really different than what I'm talking about, because that idea is really that the conformations are locations, and they are locations where the pathogen is, right? It's usually talked about that. The pathogen is half inside, half outside in the Shaoyang. And so you want to get it out, and the formula gets it out of Shaoyang. So it's a different, it's a different idea than what I'm talking about. Which is fine. Like there's different frames you can put around the classic theories. So in general, I think that we have to think about what we can substitute for Ma Huang, because many people can't get Ma Huang. And I don't feel like a good authority about that, because I've always been able to get Ma Huang, so I'm always able to use it. So I don't have experience with other herbs, but I can always apply the fundamental principles. And so, Ma Huang is warm and light and pungent. So I think that just increasing Shengjiang and Guizhi is not quite enough. I would say add Jingjia, which is this warm, light, pungent herb. It doesn't have all the qualities of Ma Huang. Ma Huang is actually hollow. It's a hollow tube. And so it really helps open the pores and promote urination because of that being a hollow tube. Jingjia doesn't have that, so I think for some formulas like, Yue Bijaju, where you're using Ma Huang to get rid of water, maybe you need Ma Huang and not Jingjia wouldn't be right. But for like Ma Xing Shigan Tang, Da Qing Long Tang, I think you could increase Guizhi Shengjiang and add Jingjia. I think if the body has even more achiness, you maybe could add Fang Feng, so those are ideas. If the problem is more like difficulty breathing, then let's say it's a mashing shirantang pattern where the surface isn't open, which is going to give you a hard time breathing, but the chest is blocked as well. Both things are giving you a hard time breathing. And, you can open the surface with mahong and maybe add, the Zhewan or Guangdonghua, something like that. So you want to apply the principles to the substitutions. Yeah. Did that answer your question there? Oh, now I can't hear you.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes and no. I think I need to listen this recording again to understand, because I do have mahong, but I'm kind of afraid to use mahong and chaihu together. But you were saying something about not looking at as a confirmation, or yeah, I need to listen that part again, Sharon.
And I think maybe tomorrow Monday, listening to Sally will be really helpful. Like, how are we thinking about what is it that requires mahong versus, guizhi, and what are we looking for? What are we seeing? Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I just hadn't ever thought about how I don't use mahong with chaihu, but I don't, I'm very aware of not using fuling with mahong, but, not using mahong with chaihu, I hadn't really thought of her. So, yeah.
That was actually my other question, my back of my head, fuling and mahong. Can I use it if there is? Yeah.
Yeah, it's like kind of, they're very different principles, So I've actually used them together because I felt like both principles were needed. But in general, it's kind of thought, that the person isn't peeing because their surface is blocked. So it's like putting your finger on the end of a straw, and that's why the fluids are accumulating, right? Because if you take your finger off the straw, the water comes out. And fuling is a different action, where you're helping the water to drain out the bottom, so it's completely different places where you're working with why the water is inhibited in the body, and so you wouldn't open up both of them, is a kind of common idea. And I don't completely abide by that, but I like the idea because it means you have to be very careful about which end you're opening. But even like sanrentong, it opens both ends, the top and the bottom, and works beautifully. So I think, again, we want to look at what are the principles,
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And just as we go to the next person, so these webinars on the classical Chinese herbal principles that Sharon and her group are going to be presenting, they will be posted on Healthy Seminars. The best place to go is healthyseminars.com/resources. And then you'll see them under the, I think we call them topical webinars. And it'll be under that section. And then when you go to register, remembering that's you registering with our Zoom. So you get a link reminder when Zoom starts. You still have to log in and get in. The first 500 get in. And as you know, we're putting the recordings up on Sharon's Healthy Seminars bio page for 48 hours for this one. And we'll find a place for the rest, and they'll stay up for 48 hours. If you can't get into the Zoom, then they will be streaming live on our Facebook page, on Healthy Seminars Facebook page, and our YouTube page. So there's no reason you can't get in. But if you want to interact like we're doing now, then obviously the Zoom room. If you can't raise your hand, because some people said they're not able to raise their hand, then just put in the chat, cannot raise hand, and type your question and we'll ask it. If you can raise your hand, then do so and we'll keep going through this. And we'll go for another 10 minutes. Sharon, is that fair? That will take us to the 2-hour mark.
Yeah,
is that good for you?
Whatever. Yeah,
Okay.
whatever.
Okay.
It's fine with me.
Sandro?
Yeah.
So Donna, your mic is unmuted now. Can you?
You, Donna?
Yes.
Hi. Sharon, thank you so much. I found a lot of what you said very intuitive too, like this way of thinking of the narrative. My question is about the Xiaoyang, I'm sorry, Xiaoyang not pivoting. With this disease that shall not be named. Can you talk about some of the symptoms that you're seeing that help you diagnose that that is where things are?
Yeah,
This fever
I
symptom
think
meeting, or
that
there-
I think maybe not, because I think that will come when we get to the formula discussions. Like, how do you tell that it's there? But again, to not completely avoid your question, you know, the Shaoyang symptoms, when the pivot doesn't function, and it really depends on the exact presentation, because there are lots of Shaoyang formulas, right? From Sunisan, Xiao Chai Hu Tang, Da Chai Hu Tang, you know, Chai Hu Jia Long Gu Mu Li Tang, you know, lots of things that involve the Shaoyang. So the symptoms can vary a lot. But one thing, you know, we want to keep in mind is that it's that the pivot isn't turning. And so a lot of different things can show up in the body, everything from digestive illnesses to, again, like aches and pains can show up. And, you know, but one thing that you'll see is that, you know, for the most, like for something like Shao Chai Hutong, that it's not primarily a deficient pattern. You know, it's mostly more of an excess pattern, and issues tend to show up in pivot areas in the body, like in the throat, in the groin, in the armpits, and in the eyes, you know, are open and close. So they're also considered pivot areas. You know, so it's a big question, because there's a whole way that I sort of kind of how I diagnose that. You know, is more than just here's how I tell if it's Shaoyang. Yeah. So sorry, I can't be more specific.
I have Maria Morris as the notification for the microphone. Is your microphone working?
Yeah, can you hear me, Sharon?
I can hear you.
Hi, nice to be live with you.
Yeah.
I wonder, just a quick question about Da Chai Hutong presentation. Would there always be constipation, or could it just be very strong smelling stool?
No, constipation is not necessary for Da Chai Hutong. It's common for that formula presentation because we know it has Da Huang in it. And, you know, but the presentation does have a Yangming excess in the abdomen, you know, which means that there's blockage in the abdomen. Now that blockage could even manifest as diarrhea, you know, where it's all blocked and it gets built up, and then finally there's diarrhea. You know, so what we have is that there's fullness in the abdomen related to the digestion, but not necessarily constipation. And sometimes people even have normal bowel movements. Now, when you often with Da Chai Hutong, if the pattern matches and they have normal bowel movements, they'll often get some what we call like comfortable diarrhea, you know, like a diarrhea that feels like what a relief. Even if they have normal stool, they'll get comfortable diarrhea as a result of taking the formula, and then that diarrhea goes away very, very quickly. So
Okay, and then I'm just thinking of a patient who also has very strong smelling urine just recently. Could that Shaoyang heat transfer through to the urine? Like
yeah,
small intestine?
the kind of concentrated, strong smelling urine is for me like a for sure sign of heat in the lower body.
Okay.
So it can manifest as, you know, strong smelling urine.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yeah.
So Bethany Richardson, you should have a note to unmute your microphone. Is your microphone working now?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Bethany.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. It's nice to see friends here like you and Maria.
So my question is a two-part. One is, how often do you see, how quickly does a pattern presentation change
And I ask this because myself and I think many of us are mailing our formulas out. And so we're not able to get formulas as, on a daily basis to people. So I wonder, in your experience, what you're actually seeing as far as the change. And then, as you stated that this is such a strong pattern, not dissimilar to other things, but it's just more strong. Are you increasing your dosage?
Mm. So as for your first question, it's a big problem, isn't it? That the best thing to do is get people herbs quickly and monitor them on a daily basis, which is, yeah, the best thing to do, but not the possible thing to do. And I had 2 cases in Philadelphia that were suspected COVID in one family. And for $70, I overnighted the herbs. But even then, it was like by the next day they got them. But then I checked in the morning and the pattern still fit. And so the herbs were fine. But if you mail them, then you still have to check, is it right? Does it fit the pattern still, or has it changed radically? So we really need solutions for this. And I think there are people, like I think Bill Egloff at Crane Herb is working on, how do we get herbs to people quickly? And then also for our patients, wherever they are, like since then, those people were in Philadelphia. And since then I found a resource in Philadelphia, so if somebody's sick in Philadelphia, I have a place that you could go pick them up. I can order the herbs and you can go pick them up. So we have to try to connect with herb pharmacies. Like if someone from LA calls me, I can send them to Fat Turtle. And there's a wonderful woman, Kristen Wisgerda, is like providing formulas for people in the Boston area. So a lot of things are starting to develop so that we can get herbs to people really quickly. And those structures might help us in the future, even when this goes by. So there's really nothing for it. And you have to, if it's not the right pattern and you really think this would be wrong now, you can't give the herbs, even if you mailed them. You have to figure out something else. So it's a real limitation.
Mm-hmm.
And then what was your other question?
Are you increasing your dosage, your daily dose?
No. It's kind of, if it's mostly powders because, mailing them and getting them quickly to people, but it would be, standard 3 grams 3 times a day. If it's a big person, it would increase. If it didn't have an effect, I would increase it before giving up if I'm pretty clear on the pattern. But I'm starting just with a regular dose. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are you seeing the pattern change day by day? Or
yeah, like my 2 cases in Philly, and really I've only seen 3 cases. So, so I'm also thinking of the people that are in our group, so we get to benefit from each other's experience. So, the people that I saw in Philly, like the next day they were better, but the pattern still fit, so they could take it one more time, both of them, but then after that, it wasn't right anymore. But they were really out of the woods then. And so they really didn't need herbs after that. I think it can change quickly. It's the nature of these strong things that come with a lot of blockage that they can transform quickly. Yeah.
Thank you, Bethany, for your question. Sharon, that was great too. Sandra, you want to get, I think it's Alasdair Reed. I apologize if I'm not pronouncing your name correctly. Excuse me, I'm Canadian.
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, that's fine. It's Alasdair.
Alasdair. You sound like Sandra or maybe somebody from Australia. Where are you from?
Yeah, that's right. I'm in Bellingen, which is halfway between Sydney and Brisbane.
All right, so you're on your Saturday there. So nice.
Yeah, started at 3:30 this morning.
Wow.
Okay.
I'm supposed to be there in August, and it hasn't gotten canceled yet. But,
well, good luck. I hope.
Yes.
I hope that ends up happening.
I'm not sure. It sort of doesn't seem like it, but anyway, what's your question?
Yeah, my question is back to more to earlier in your thing. I think maybe you probably did answer a bit of it, but I just want to check my understanding. I've seen lots and lots of theories around on quote hidden pathogens on lots of forums, and people saying, "Oh, it's a hidden pathogen." But I'm wondering, my thinking is that rather than a hidden or lurking pathogen, that it's something that's sunk into the body. It's rather that it's a reaction of the individual's constitution to the effort required to work with the internal environment. So, in a way, you could look at it like it's a bit like a hit and run accident. So the car smashes into your car gets hit by another car, and then the car that did it drove away, but you're left with the damage.
Exactly. Exactly.
It isn't a hidden pathogen. It's like if your fender got bashed in, I think you used the word fender, then your wheel isn't going to turn, or your radiator got busted, your cooling system's not going to get work. But the thing that did it's long gone.
Yeah, I think that in general, it would be useful to even think of this like that. Like it comes in like a hurricane and makes all this damage, and that the symptoms we're seeing are the symptoms of the damage, and now, like if you imagine a house getting damaged, I'll go to a house metaphor from your car, house getting damaged from a hurricane, and now the pipes broke, and now there's all this water all over the place, and so the treatment principle is not going to be to get rid of hurricanes anymore, right? The treatment principle is going to be fix the pipe, and so now I'm kind of your initial question, can you say that again, because I followed your metaphor and then lost the
I think you probably, it was more about the validity.
Oh, the lurking pathogen. Yeah.
Lurking pathogen.
So the lurking pathogen is, to me, the whole idea of lurking pathogen is kind of like a catch-all for anything that we can't really find very clearly. If we're looking for pathogens, which is not what I do, right? I don't look for where is that pathogen. Oh, like it's vague, and it only shows up now and then. They get like feverish and, and then it's gone and it's still lurking in there and I can't really find it and I don't know how to get rid of it. It's a kind of a catch-all for things that we don't understand. And also it's related to me, looking for the pathogen. What's the pathogen? Where is it? And so that my eye is not on that at all, So there might be water all over the floor, and it might be that water started getting, toxic and disgusting because the car battery got mixed up with it. And, but the, when we restore the function, we repair the pipe, then water stops pouring out all over the place, and we have functions in our body that clean things out. And so if things are in there that are not being cleaned out, I'm looking like what's not functioning very well, because I'm not going to go in and clean it out. The body is going to clean it out. So how do I help the body with that natural function of being able to process and get rid of things that don't belong in the body? So when I hear that, like a lurking pathogen, I always think, oh, that's that catch-all for things that feel really vague to us. It must be a lurking pathogen if I can't really identify it or find it. If it hangs out for a long time and I haven't been able to get rid of it, it must be a lurking pathogen. So it doesn't really tell us anything about what method we should use, right? Like if we've identified it's a lurking pathogen, what does that say that we do? It doesn't imply any method. Whereas if we have something like the Shaoyang pivot isn't functioning, it implies a method, right? We need to get that pivot working again. So I don't find it very useful. Yeah.
Thank you for your question.
One wonders if, sorry.
We're just going to keep going on because we talked about this a bit.
Thank
but
you,
just
Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
You're welcome.
Appreciated.
Next up is going to be Miriam.
Miriam, yeah, she should have the note to turn on the microphone.
Okay, I think you can hear me, right? Hi, Sharon. Thank you so much for sharing all this knowledge with us. My question, I came on a few minutes late. I don't know if you talked about it at all, but my question is if people are feeling fine right now, is there anything that you would recommend other than their constitutional, going by their constitutional pattern or what we're seeing right in front of us as a preventative kind of method?
No, I think the only thing is like we should all be really making sure we're well rested and that we're eating regularly. Like I don't think it's probably a good idea to go out and party, and waste your body in any way. Like just to make sure, like I'm helping all the functions of my body work the best they can. Like I'm getting some exercise, I'm sleeping well, and then as practitioners, we can individualize things. If somebody tends to be cold and have cold lungs, then I think that ginger tea is like wonderful for them. If for example somebody has a really stuffy epigastric area and a yellow coating on their tongue, and and we think there's stagnation and heat in their stomach, well, maybe taking some Swedish bitters would be really helpful for that person, and very helpful for decreasing their risk of having a harder time processing something like this. So it reminds me, I want to say, like, with this, and also with something like cancer, for me, I'm not treating the virus. I'm not trying to get rid of the virus. I'm not treating the virus at all. I'm only helping the body work with it in a way that will keep the body safe. That's my intention. So it doesn't even have to be taken down from YouTube, because I'm not treating the virus. I'm treating people who are suffering from the virus, from the effects of the virus. And the same is true with like cancer patients. Like I don't go after the cancer. There's a lot in Chinese medicine where people go after the cancer, and I did that for years and got terrible results. Whereas when I started working with people's wheels, like helping everything function better, I started having people with cancer feel so much better and live so much longer, um, so that my whole orientation is, I don't even treat Lyme disease. I don't treat anything. I'm always treating the wheel, and I'm looking for where is it not functioning well, and then promoting the function where it's not working. And then, there are many people who think I cured their Lyme. I got rid of their Lyme, and that's fine. You can think of it that way. But I never thought of it that way, with these basic principles. And so I think, yeah. Anyway, I think that answers your question.
Thank you very much. And next up, we're going to have Barb. So Barb Folds, I think you should be able to speak now.
Folds, thanks. Can you hear me?
Hi, Barb.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you. So I got booted off for a little while and I got back on, so I apologize if you talked about this at all. Probably not. And maybe this is a question for upcoming, but I just wanted to ask about resolving the exterior. And I know a few people that I think got the unnamed virus, but they never got tested, so they don't know for sure. But the two people I'm thinking of exhibited really very different symptoms. The one person got a really high fever right away and had really tight congestion. And then as she moved through it, and she's still pretty sick and she's got a pretty phlegmy cough now, but she's still getting a fever. Every so often her fever will spike. And so that's kind of interesting. And then the other person seemed to, and I don't know if this is the unnamed virus, but seemed to not really have much Taiyang symptoms at all, like not much exterior stuff, but it went directly to their chest and their digestion. And that's lingering also, but not the exterior thing. So I'm wondering about the concept of always checking where I'm wondering about resolving the exterior. Like
you would only resolve the exterior if you're diagnosing that it has not resolved yet. So you only go up and out if the body isn't able to go up and out. So if that's not the case, which it's not in so many cases, like in our group, people are using all kinds of formulas, and a lot of them have no Taiyang kind of method in the formula presentation. So we're always, all the symptoms are always telling us where things aren't functioning, but even if it started that the Taiyang wasn't functioning, the next day it could be not that at all. It could now be something different, because it does shift and change. And especially then in recovery, that you're going to be seeing different things. Yeah.
So that if you look at it as like levels of or transformational levels, like the body is transforming things on a level basis, right? Like Taiyang's more of an exterior transformative process, and then no,
I don't look at it as levels. Like the levels are linear, like it's going deeper, deeper, deeper. And that's kind of what Wenbing is. Shanghanlun is not levels.
Okay.
It's functions, right? So I never look at it as it's going deeper, deeper, deeper. So it's always like, it's upset this function, it's upset that function. How can I restore those functions?
So there is a possibility then for Taiyang to, even weeks into the disease process.
If you see the pattern, you treat the pattern.
Okay.
Yeah, it's like as simple as that. What's the pattern that's in front of you, and you treat that pattern.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so yeah, it can morph into, being Taiyang again. You just, whatever's in front of you, that's what you treat.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay. You're
Talk to
welcome.
you soon. Bye.
Thank you, Barb. Next up, we got Martijn. Martijn from the Netherlands. You're up.
Martijn, hi.
Hey, Sharon. Great to see you.
Nice to see you.
And thanks for the great talk. I really enjoyed it. What I find really difficult now is I've seen a few patients who have this virus, and what strikes me is that they stay very exhausted for a long time after they had, for example, like 1 week or 10 days after they had it.
Yes.
And so it's not clear if they still have this or not. I mean, they're in the recovery stage, but maybe they still have it. And for me, I find it difficult to see when do I switch to, I mean, I see a lot of exhaustion. So, and like, this tongue, which is pale and swollen and so on, I can't feel the pulse. So, but next, aside from the exhaustion, I also still see sometimes the shortness of breath. So I find it difficult. Yeah. How do I know if there's maybe again an exterior which is not resolved, or is it because the lung energy needs to be consolidated by now?
Yeah. So, I think that if you go by the feeling of coming down with something and achy body, that's going to be helpful. Like, is it on the exterior still or not? And if it's just shortness of breath, like that symptom by itself, it doesn't tell you by itself, like, I need Shirgao or, and so if you think about, like, as a general pattern, what happens, like, it gets very hot and very blocked in the chest, right? And that heat does damage to the body, and it leaves the body scorched.
Yeah.
And so what you'll often see is just exhaustion, along with thirst, and also what I call dispersion thirst, like you drink and you pee, drink and you pee. And so the body has kind of lost its ability to absorb back formulas. And so I think, really depending on the pattern, a formula like Sheng Mai San, and even a formula like Sheng Mai San, potentially with something like Zhimu or Tianhuafen, if they have like stiff body pain, the Gugan, and the stiff body pain's different than the achy body on the
Yeah.
exterior, so just think like that the symptom by itself doesn't, and we're not looking for, do you still have it? We're just looking for what's not functioning very well now.
Yeah.
But it can be tricky, like, is the yang ming still blocked, is more.
Yeah, because it seems like they're switching. I still see the heat. Some, like, one day it's again the red tongue, and the next day it's primarily the exhaustion.
Yeah.
And so the thirst is coming and going, and so it's very difficult sometimes
And
to
it
see.
can, you can have a pattern like Ma Xing Shigantong pattern that's very mild.
Can't hear you.
Oh, I don't know why you can't hear me. Can other people hear?
We can still hear you. Martine, can you hear us, Martine?
I can't hear you anymore.
All right, I'm gonna mute her because she can't hear us. I don't know what happened over there.
You can tell her that I'll answer her question and she can listen to it. Go to the end of the recording and she can hear my answer.
Oh wait, hold on. I think she's back. I'm gonna mute her again.
Anyway.
Okay, good.
Martine, can you hear us again?
Well, now I'm in again. Sorry, I just missed that part.
So you can have like a Ma Xing Shigantong pattern that's very mild, in the aftermath. For sure you can have that. And I had that myself, like in January, I was sick. And, and it had been a Ma Xing Shigantong pattern. And I thought, okay, like I did that and it helped. But now, and I realized I'm exhausted. I feel achy. There's a fever, but I could actually feel my pulse too, because pulse is so important, isn't it? And we don't have that. But people can also try feeling their own pulses, and you could just ask, like, does it feel really strong in that right guan or not? And get some information from that. And ultimately, sometimes you don't have enough information to know. You just don't, and you have to have a hypothesis and try it, and that's all we can do, and be in close touch. So
well, that's you.
Yeah, good to see you all. I hopefully will see you soon. Bye-bye.
I wanted to let you know that some of the questions, Sharon has blogged about this, which is why we ended up doing the recordings here, these videos. So at whitepinehealingarts.org, check out her blog. So she's talked about this interior, exterior stuff as well. So you can read it there as well. And I know you guys think, Lauren, why do you repeat yourself? I keep saying that the recordings and stuff will be on the resource page. And that's because I keep getting private messages. Where is it going to be? And I rather annoy you and say it 6 times here than have to answer 50 emails after this because I'm still going to get some emails. So if you're wondering if I've lost my marbles, no, I just want to be efficient with my team. So the recording will be on Sharon's bio page for 48 hours. And all the other lectures she's mentioned and all the other stuff that we have going on telehealth. I'm doing a talk on Sunday. We got Deborah Betts. We got so much free content for you guys. That will all be on the resource link. And that you can find that link on the homepage. There's a little logo and just it says healthyseminars.com resources. The logo is community, unity, immunity. If you click on that, it'll take you to what's happening. And obviously you can always email us, but that's where we're going to post that stuff in a few hours. My understanding is Sally Rappaport is going to be doing the one on Monday to kick it off, the second one. And it's going to be talking about the presentations that she's seen for the virus that you cannot name that she's using. I think it was Ma Wantong and Guizhou Tong she mentioned from my memory. It was way up
on
in
Monday.
That's
and Lauren,
on Monday.
I have to get going. I said I was happy to go on, but I never dreamed it would go on this long because I have a meeting at 3 my time.
So guys, I know we could go on forever. So I know there's a few people with good questions, but we are going to end it. I also promised my family I would hang out with them a bit. It's ironic, Sharon, we're on isolation and my team and myself, we're doing this from early morning. There's no sleep ins and we're staying up to midnight. And my kids are like, I get an hour with them in the morning and the evening right now. So thank you. We're going to stop this.
Thank you. What you're offering just in general, I think is, you're just doing a huge service to everybody with such warmth and generosity, and just thank you so much. I really appreciate what you're doing.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And thank you guys for coming in. This makes it feel good to see that you guys want this, seeing 500 people in the room and then all those on Facebook and YouTube. That's wonderful. We got a whole bunch more coming our way. People have been contacting us. And so we're picking and choosing. If we don't choose you, I'm sorry. But we're just doing it with the idea. We want great content. And really my goal is community. So the idea of being able to turn on your mic to see each other, that's the idea behind this, is community. We got so much content that you could just watch on your own in isolation. So I'm not doing that. You can go do that on my site now. But I want community. So if you want to see Sharon, you want to see Sally, you want the Throwback Thursdays, then you come to the live webinar, or you got 48 hours to watch it. Why? Because I want you here. I want community. So Sandra, we're going to end this with turning on everybody's mics again, and you can send your love to Sharon and to your friends on here. Let's do this for 45 seconds and end the meeting. So go.
Thank you so much, Sharon and Lauren and your whole team. Thank you very, very much.
Hearing more about all this
Hey, way to
information.
go.
Very, very much.
Thank you. Great work.
You.
I know that you'll be and worse in. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Sharon.